So we have a question from a viewer about nursing homes, and this viewer is concerned about potential cuts to nursing homes and is concerned about this potentially affecting small rural nursing homes. And this viewer also raises a question about assisted living licensure expenses, which might also be a problem, particularly in the rural area. So let's start with you, Representative Lulick, nursing home licensure.
Well, I'd rather jump to the funding issue.
Yeah, potential cuts.
Which is,
that's
I mean,
the
first,
permanent question. Yes, go right ahead.
But because a couple of years ago we and Representative Schumacher was really involved in this from down in your country. We made some substantial changes in how we reimbursed the nursing homes for people that are on medical assistance, and the first opportunity in many, many years, because those rates were froze. No pay raises. You just kept taking things out of hides, so you started having to lay people off and go to fewer people. So we changed it so that there's an adjustment there based on actual cost. And that brought some immediate relief and some hope looking into the future. Because I'll tell you what, a couple of my nursing homes came to me in person just in the past couple of weeks and said, what the governor's got laid out right now is going to send us backwards. I'm not going to be able to even think about giving my people a pay raise, and McDonald's still beats me out on those people at the entry level as far as their pay wages. So there is a huge, huge problem there. They want to tinker with the reimbursement system and put in some more things about this and that and quality, and we need to leave that alone because had two different groups came and then the rest of them called because I got a number of small rural nursing homes and made it very clear. The people working in those nursing homes are scared to death right now because if we tinker with that the way it looks like in the governor's budget, there's no more pay raises. They start having to short on people, and you can't replace equipment in those nursing homes, and so boy, I mean, I'm really frustrated about that because that is just starting to work, and it's costing us a little more money. But you can't expect the nursing home folks to not be compensated properly because that is really tough work. You've got to be dedicated to that kind of work. And if we don't get those young people in there in the beginning, that's a career, that part of healthcare. And so that's really important. And then it goes to the nursing home licensure thing. That's that's a pretty well-worn path. Now there's some assisted living home situation that we've got to make some strides on and make sure that we've got the proper level of licensure and inspections and that type of stuff. There's that's an area that needs some more work.
Representative Freiberg, your thoughts?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I do think we need to work on the issue of nursing home licensure. Certainly we need to make sure the costs are done in a way that it's not they're not overpowering. But a year or two ago, the Star Tribune came out with a series on elder abuse, and there are very serious issues.
And that's driving some of this discussion about assisted living homes, as I understand
Yes,
it.
absolutely. Yeah, no, we're one of the only states in the country that has no form of licensure of assisted living homes. So I think after that series came out, Governor Dayton appointed a panel led by AARP to come out with recommendations, and licensure was one of the top things they recommended, along with things like giving residents that have had some form of abuse a cause of action in the courts. Giving a lot of families have expressed interest in being able to put some sort of camera in place in the rooms to make sure nothing bad is happening to their elders there. So, but I do think licensure, we do need to come up with a way to do that because there are a lot of great nursing homes out there, but we need to make sure our seniors have protections in place just to make sure they're not forgotten in these places and that there are adequate protections for them to make sure there isn't abuse occurring.
Senator Champion?
On the other side of the equation, we definitely have to make sure that our elders are protected. And when you think in terms of the governor has been very good about understanding the importance of not just our children, but also our elderly. And what do we need to do to protect them and do all the things that I just heard my good friend Cindy to my right has talked about, but also about wages for the workers. How do we make sure that there's wage growth in order to attract a variety of different people to come into that area and work? That's been a problem, not just from Governor Walz, who's been new to our administration. This has been a problem that we've been talking about for quite some time. And Governor Walz has come forward and said and has said there is a need for us to do something in real time in order to make sure that we are attracting the brightest and the best in order to take care of our seniors. There's also a lot of discussion around PCAs. Are there some alternative ways by which to make sure that our seniors can stay in their homes longer and not necessarily in a convalescent home or a nursing home? What do we need to do in order to give seniors independent living opportunities and options in real time? And so, to me, when we think in terms of our seniors, we need to really think about what they need and develop a strategic ways by which to meet those needs and to make the necessary investments. Now, as we keep talking about all the investments around the table, the one thing that everyone will say, there's a need for this, there's a need for that, but no one wants to talk about revenue. Because the one thing that the state is having a hard time around is revenue. And when you look at the December forecast, when we were forecasting $1.5 billion, then in the February forecast, it came in a little over $1 billion. It was a $492 million difference plus. And if you listen to this, the economist says what? We have a structural problem because we do not have enough people to back in the labor that we are experiencing from our great tsunami. And if we don't do that, and if we do not generate revenue or raise revenue in some shape, form, or fashion, we're not going to be able to meet the obligations that we know that we all need. So be it a gas tax for our roads and bridges where we're getting a D rating, whether we need to make these special education investments in school and for our veterans and others. I just think that as we think about nursing homes, we have to think about revenue and where that revenue is going to come from and how do we do it in a responsible way, because we all want to enjoy a wonderful life as we do have here in the great state of Minnesota, but sometimes people don't want to make the necessary sacrifice to pay for it. And so I think we have to be very serious about that, because so many of us want more, but we want to contribute less. And those two things they are mutually exclusive, in my opinion.
So I'm going to give you a chance, Senator Deems, on the nursing home assisted living thing, and then we're going to go to the great question that Senator Champions raised, of this question of revenue. And it certainly is something that's on the table. But first of all, nursing home assisted living.
Well, 2 years ago we passed a bill, and I think 2 or 3 years ago it was about $139 million new dollars to put into nursing homes, and a good majority of that went out to rural Minnesota nursing homes because of the fact that there was the imbalance between the Twin City nursing homes and the rural nursing homes. Now, in Governor Walz's budget, not only is there a reduction in dollars, but now that formula is now in jeopardy too. Yeah. And so that's what's got a lot of the rural nursing homes very nervous, is because we got that formula somewhat tweaked about 3 years ago, and now there's undermining to change that back closer to the old formula. So that makes me very nervous.